Israel's goal has always been ethnic cleansing. I think a lot of people have been watching what Israel's been doing in Gaza and think to themselves, understandably, how could any country do this? But what I'm about to tell you will make it absolutely clear that wiping out the Palestinians has been Israel's goal all along. It starts with the 19th century movement to create the State of Israel, the Zionist movement. While there's nothing wrong in principle with Jews having a homeland, the Zionist movement insisted that a Jewish state had to be in the heart of the Arab world, Palestine. The slogan for the Zionist movement was a land for a people without a land. Of course, Palestine wasn't a land without a people. Hundreds of thousands of Arabs already lived there. This immediately created a problem for the Zionist movement. Israel couldn't be a Jewish state if the majority of people weren't Jewish. The Zionist movement knew that the only way they could actually have a Jewish state in Palestine was to kick the Arabs out and move Jews in, and they openly wrote about this. Leading Zionist Israel Zangwill wrote, "Palestine is not so much occupied by Arabs as overrun by them. They're nomads, and therefore we must persuade them to trek." Another leading Zionist and future Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, put it more bluntly, saying, "We must expel the Arabs and take their place." The Zionist movement was also completely aware that they'd have to take the land by force. Another Zionist leader, Zev Jabotinsky, wrote, "A voluntary agreement between us and the Arabs of Palestine is inconceivable. Every indigenous people will resist alien settlers as long as they see any hope of ridding themselves of the danger of foreign settlement. This is how the Arabs will behave so long as they possess a gleam of hope that they can prevent Palestine from becoming the land of Israel." This didn't deter the Zionist movement, though. Jabotinsky goes on to write, "Settlement of Palestine can develop behind an iron wall, which the Arabs will be powerless to break down." Zionism is often mistakenly referred to as a movement for Jewish salvation, but Zionism had a distinct colonial character from its inception. Whereas most liberation movements involve a group of people ridding themselves of foreign occupiers on their land, Zionists saw themselves as a Western force that would bring civility to the backwards Arab world. Leader of the Zionist movement Theodor Herzl wrote, "If it's God's will that we return to our historic fatherland, we should like to do so as representatives of Western civilization and bring cleanliness, order, and well-established customs to this plague-ridden, blighted corner of the Orient." For decades, Zionism lacked the support of the vast majority of Jews and relied mostly on ultra-rich aristocratic European families to finance itself. To gain traction, the Zionist movement also tried to make itself useful to Europe's leading imperialists. In 1902, Theodor Herzl wrote a letter to Cecil Rhodes, the infamous British imperialist who carved the British Empire's path through southern Africa. In the letter, Herzl wrote, "You're being invited to help make history. It doesn't involve Africa, but a piece of Asia Minor. Not Englishmen, but Jews. How then do I happen to turn to you? Because it is something colonial." Let's think about this for a sec. If Zionism really was a liberation movement, why would they seek an alliance with one of the greatest oppressors of humankind in history? Why would they expect to win his support? Almost all of the European imperialists that supported the Zionist movement were motivated by anti-Semitism. To them, Zionism was a great excuse to get Jews out of their country. The Zionist movement even struck a similar agreement with Nazi Germany. While the worldwide Jewish community was boycotting German businesses in the early 30s, the Zionist movement struck an agreement with the Nazis called the Havara Agreement. It allowed Jews emigrating from Germany to Palestine to exchange their assets for German-made goods, which they then sold and received the proceeds of. While Zionism became hegemonic in Jewish communities following the horrors of the Holocaust, Zionism itself and the notion of a Jewish state in Palestine far predate the Holocaust and were firmly rooted in the idea that Palestine should be ethnically cleansed to make room for Jewish settlement. It's not a coincidence that the day Israelis mark as Israeli Independence Day, May 14th, Palestinians remember as the Nakba, or the catastrophe, a series of massacres that forced 750,000 Palestinians out of their homes. Israel's founding is quite literally synonymous with terror and displacement for Palestinians, just as the Zionists said it would be. In the words of Israeli General Moshe Dayan, Jewish villages were built in the place of Arab villages. You don't even know the names of these Arab villages because these geography books no longer exist. There's not one single place built in this country that didn't have a former Arab population. Last week, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave a speech where he described Israel's expanding war in Gaza as Israel's second war of independence. In other words, he's saying that Israel intends to finish what the first war started, the expulsion of all Palestinians from historic Palestine. To Palestinians, it's obvious what this means. A second independence war means a second Nakba. The first Nakba turned 750,000 Palestinians into refugees. But in just the last 4 weeks, Israel has created 1.4 million displaced persons in Gaza. The Zionist movement has been openly stating their genocidal intent for the Palestinians, not just in the last 4 weeks, not just for the last 75 years, but even before that, when the state of Israel was just an idea. We know what their end goal is. The only question that remains is, this time, will the world let it happen?